I'm going to start off by talking about a small little episode that happened about 25 years ago. One of my friend's parents called me saying that somebody he knew had attempted suicide. The person was about 30 years old, and when his mother walked into the room, she found that he had tied a noose around the fan and was attempting to put his head through it. There was a whole bunch of shouting and screaming and what is happening and so on. And they wanted to get in touch with a psychiatrist to find out what had happened. So they got in touch with me. What was the history of the kid? He was a 30-year-old guy, done brilliantly in his studies, was working as an investment banker. Over the last 2 years, has got multiple promotions, seemed to be on top of the world, seemed to be on top of everything. Nobody ever felt that he was depressed. And all of you belonging to the Google generation, there was no evidence of crying, there was no evidence of not sleeping properly, not eating properly. He seemed to be just a very happy guy. His parents said that they never ever had any problems related to his behavior. According to them, he just had alcohol once a week, once in 10 days with his friends, like a whole bunch of other people of his age group. He kept getting good reviews at work whenever there was a review or an appraisal as to what his work was like. He was not in a relationship. He had broken up about 2 years ago, and his parents now were dropping hints that he should get married. So overall, there didn't seem to be anything wrong. When I went in and spoke to him, there was obvious evidence of depression. And he belongs to one of those people who say, "Oh my God, how can I be depressed? I can't be depressed. I come from a great home. I have a great family. There is no real financial issue. I'm doing so well at work. What can I be having that makes me feel depressed?" And when I gently suggested that maybe he should have sought help for his symptoms, which came about in one of the interviews, his whole thing was, "But isn't that an indication that I am weak? Isn't that an indication that there's something wrong with me? May not that be an indication that my parents haven't brought me up properly? And that would make me feel terribly, terribly, terribly guilty." So let's get to the facts. India is in the throes of a mental health calamity. It's an epidemic which, unless we pay specific heed to, has the potential of causing us to really die down as a race, as a community, as a country. We know that depression is the commonest psychological disorder in the world. It affects about 20 to 25% of the population, which means if there are 4 of you and 3 of you are not depressed, then you're depressed. Suicides is a horrible thing that is happening. And unfortunately, the commonest age at which suicide happens is the age group of the adolescent. When I was a medical student many, many, many years ago, we were told that suicide normally happens at about the age of 17, 18, 19, when you kind of have finished with your 12th and you're looking back and you're seeing that you haven't done as well as you wanted to do. There's so much of competition. You wanted to get into some kind of college, and because of the marks that you got, you couldn't get into that kind of a college, and you started feeling depressed and you killed yourself. Today we are diagnosing suicides and looking at suicides at the age of 10, 11, 12, which is a terrible indictment on our society. Anxiety, second most common psychological issue. Most of us land up not even knowing that we are so anxious. There may be stage fright where it's impossible for you to talk in front of an audience. You may just have this feeling of impending doom that something bad is going to happen. And whatever you do, that feeling doesn't go away. OCDs, obsessive compulsive disorder. We've all heard of people washing and so on, but that is probably the commonest one. But there are a whole number of other symptoms that we're looking at. And we are finding again OCDs happening in younger and younger age groups. I remember I was in a school some time ago and I was just watching kids going to play. And there must have been a kid in the 7th or 8th standard, so that makes him about 12 or 13. I was watching him. He was waiting for people to go, then he put his right foot out of the main door, then put his left foot out, tapped twice. He was pushed. He went at the back, and then he retraced, and he had to perform that little ritual. These are typically found with OCDs. Most of the time, we don't even know that there is a problem. People are living longer and longer years. Geriatrics. At one time, we all thought that you would die by the time you're about 55, 60. Today, we live till 75, 80. If you're a Parsi like me, we never die. We land up now seeing the problems associated with old age. Alzheimer's. At one time, 20 years ago, you hardly talked about it. Today, in my OPDs in the hospital, when I come out into the lobby and I see the people waiting to visit their doctors, you see a huge number of people above the age of 65, 70, 75, 80. Some of them are brought in by their family, some of them come in alone, some of them have a caretaker who brings them in. And when you're kind of looking at them and you're saying they have problems with memory, they have problems with behavior, and you're wondering, is this really why I'm staying alive? To have dementia? Dementias, the next big epidemic in India. We have the largest young population in the world. We have the largest old population in the world. So with the youngsters, we are seeing a whole bunch of problems. With the oldies, we are seeing a whole bunch of problems. The people in between also have problems, but there's not so much of concentration being paid on them. The autism spectrum disorder. That's something which is a huge problem. Some of you might have heard of autism. Some of you might have seen movies where there was an autistic character. And we're looking at kids, again, 20 years ago, we would say 1 in 1,000. Today we are saying 1 in 69. Explosion. We don't know what is happening. Maybe there's something in the atmosphere which is causing it to happen. Maybe there's more reporting. The bottom line is India is in the throes of a mental health epidemic. It's in the throes of a problem. And unless we go out and we seek help, nothing is going to happen. Despite evidence to the contrary, it's not going to go away by exercising. It's not going to go away only by eating well or sleeping well. Of course, those are useful things. But it is a disease. And if it is a disease, just like in any other physical disease, you need to seek help for it. You need to go to a doctor. A few days ago, I had given a talk at a Rotary Club. And there was this guy who got up and he says, 6 months ago, I had depression and I managed. I said, I am not going to go to a doctor, and I managed very well. And I was thinking, what an absolute idiot. If you have a cough, cold and fever, you go to your GP. If you have an abdominal problem and you think that there may be appendicitis or you think there may be a problem with the liver, you'd go and seek specialist help. We have to get converted to this fact that if I'm not feeling okay mentally, if I'm having problems relating to academics, if I'm having problems with concentration, if I'm feeling terribly bereft or anxious or upset relating to my relationships, if I'm taking drugs, or if I'm taking alcohol beyond what I should be taking, if I have problems sleeping, if I'm eating too much, if I'm eating too little, if I'm having aches and pains and I go to the doctor and they check me out and they say there's nothing wrong with you, go check out and see if there's some stress which is causing the problem, you need to see a psychiatrist. You need to seek help. It is not an indication of your being weak. It is not that you have caused it to happen on yourself, which is another big thing that we're hearing about. Have I caused it to happen to me? No, you haven't. It is something that is there. What are the causes? Now, at one time, everybody would just say chemical locha. I mean, we've heard about this in our movies. Very nice, but that's a little backward. Today, we know we are all susceptible to some kind of psychological issue. But what really happens is there are electronic circuits in the brain which go awry. There are neurotransmitter issues. Sometimes there are actual structural changes that cause a problem. And it seems to be tremendously genetically oriented. So we'll end up having certain genes which have problems. And when the genes have problems, they'll end up having a person who's more susceptible to getting a psychological issue. And then you have what may be an obvious or a not so obvious psychosocial stressor. Maybe you've split with somebody, maybe there's a death in the family, maybe your parents are getting divorced, maybe there's sexual abuse, and that causes this already susceptible, sensitive individual to topple over, and then he lands up getting a problem. So you can imagine that in this situation, exercising is not really going to help. You need to do things to bring the system, the ecosystem in the head back to normal, and that will come only with medication and counseling. It is not going to come by not talking about it. So when I spoke to this young man, the guy who I had started off talking about, he told me that he was really frightened of being a failure because his parents were such high achievers. He told me that he just could not stomach the fact that somebody could do better than him in his workplace, or that he was not getting the topmost rating scales. Sometimes this sounds familiar when I talk to the audience about it. They say, yeah, I can identify with that. He had not told his parents, but he was drinking every single day. He was not getting sleep, and unfortunately in our country we do manage to get sedatives without a prescription, and he was starting to take more and more of sedatives. A stage had come when he just felt there was a feeling of uselessness, a feeling of worthlessness, a feeling that there was really no point in being alive. And one of the most poignant things that the guy told me was, Doc, if I die today, if I kill myself today, my parents will cry for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then they'll move on. Here they'll see me not performing well, and we're talking of a guy who was doing brilliantly. Here we'll see me not performing well, and they're going to die 1,000 deaths. Yes, I shouldn't be doing what I wanted to do, but I just felt that was the best way out. Sometimes we don't realize just how incapacitating a situation like depression can be. We talk about it so blithely. Oh, I'm depressed. I couldn't see my movie. I'm depressed. Mom didn't bring me the food that I wanted. My girlfriend didn't come out with a date with me. Those are not what we call clinical depression. That might be sadness. Just like we don't call every restless kid a hyperactive kid or an attention deficit disordered kid, just like that, we would not consider every sad person to be depressed. We would not consider every person who occasionally feels anxious to have an anxiety disorder. We would not consider any person who feels, oh my God, my hands are dirty today, let me wash them a little more, to have an OCD. There are a whole bunch of things that we look at in continuum, and then we see what we can do. But all of that is only possible if you come out and you ask for help. This whole thing of, I'm mad if I go to a psychiatrist, believe me, you're not. You're mad if you don't go to a psychiatrist. You're stupid if you don't go to a psychiatrist. You're idiotic if you don't go to a psychiatrist, but you won't be mad. You're very intelligent if you go to a psychiatrist to take appropriate help. And I can assure you, most of us don't have tails coming out, and we don't have horns, and we don't carry, fire with us, and we don't bring you under our spell, and we don't do any of those nonsensical things that are the myths associated with psychiatry and psychiatrists in general. And then we go into this thing of, okay, so I've diagnosed you, now may I suggest that you get onto medication? And then there becomes a, how can I ever take medication? How long am I going to take medication? And I tell them, okay, supposing you have high blood pressure, you take medication for that. Do you ever ask the doctor, how long should I take it? No. You have diabetes. You might need to take the medication for the rest of your life. Would you ever ask the doctor why? How long? What will happen? No. Of course you like to know the side effects, but you're never going to question him, and you're never going to say, oh, I'm never going to take it, it's bad for me. Because then you'll end up having the complications of the physical disease. This is a psychological illness. It's a mental illness. It is a disease. It needs medication. For what it's worth, all the myths associated with medication are myths. And please, for God's sake, do realize Dr. Google is not a doctor. He's just about 13 or 14 years old. We've been doctors since 45 years. We know a little bit more than what Dr. Google does, and anybody can type in anything in Google and it comes out. We're talking of experience, we're talking of evidence, we're talking of journals. 99% of the medical journals are not uploaded on Dr. Google. So you don't know the latest stuff, and you're listening to all nonsense. And then it comes about, oh, but somebody said that you should not take this medication. Who's the somebody? I don't know, but somebody said it. Who's the somebody? I don't know, but somebody said it. Who's this somebody? This elusive somebody is wonderful. And nobody knows who this elusive somebody is there. But he's given so much of authenticity, he's given so much of importance that it irritates the life out of us. Why does it irritate us? Because we, over a period of time, know that we can make a difference. Look, nobody is saying that we are God. Nobody is saying that we are going to have all the solutions. But we are certainly saying that just like it would be stupid for you if you had a fractured leg, if I say go and do physiotherapy, you think I'm a nut. And quite correctly. You would suggest that I should go to an orthopedic doctor, maybe get an evaluation. He might suggest a plaster. He might put in screws or a plate or whatever, depending on whatever is the situation. That's the way we'd look after a fracture. We're looking at psychological illnesses and mental illnesses as a fracture happening in the brain. In that situation, for me to say, oh, do meditation, do yoga, oh, these are very useful things. But for me to suggest that a person who's depressed or anxious or suicidal is going to benefit just by doing something like yoga is ridiculous. If you need medication, you need the medication. How do medicines work? Through a variety of ways. They work on the electronics circuits in the brain. They bring up neurotransmitter situations. They increase the thresholds for anxiety so that you feel much, you have to have more anxiety before you actually get the symptoms, and so on and so forth. Are there side effects? Of course there are. It would be stupid for me to say that there are none. But we have a huge number of medicines which are given appropriately. So for example, if you're depressed and you're not sleeping, I will not give you an antidepressant or a medicine which elevates your mood, which causes more sleep. I'll give you something which causes less sleep, so you're more awake. But if you are depressed and not getting sleep, then I will give you something from a family of medication which will enable you to sleep as well. These are carefully titrated. These are carefully evaluated. So when you go to a doctor, he's going to take a whole bunch of things together. He's going to take a whole bunch of symptoms together and then decide what has to be done. It is not done according to a hit or miss thing. It is done given his own evidence, his own training, his experience with the people that he has dealt with who have had similar or allied medical illnesses, and then you get somewhere with whatever is happening. Almost invariably, people with psychological illnesses who take medication for an adequately long time period, who are under the supervision of the doctor, who might or might not be also suggested psychotherapy and counseling, will do well. All of them will do well. And if you don't seek the help, more than 50% of them will not do well. They will have recurrences. They may attempt suicide. And they will certainly not actualize their potential to the utmost that they can. Please do realize, people who come to me run our economy. There are people from the biggest industrial houses in India who come to me, and they run the economy of our country. They are on medication. There are doctors who are on medication. There are judges who give profound judgments in our country who are on medication. Teachers are on medication. Army men are on medication. This is something which is ubiquitous. Depression doesn't choose who to go to. It has nothing to do with income. It has nothing to do with education. To some extent it does, because obviously if you're educated, you might have a better idea about what you should do and the help you should seek. But it doesn't mean that every educated person is going to seek help. Some of them are idiots as well. So what we need to do is to be aware of the fact that while it's wonderful to say, oh, I'm a strong person, it is stupid for you not to take the help that is necessary. And it is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of the fact that you are educated enough to know that you need the help that is available. Look at it in terms of perspective. India has a population of about 1.6 billion at the last review, I believe. If you're looking at anything like 25% of the population having some kind of psychological disorder, whether it's a kid who has hyperactivity, or he has a intellectual issue, or he has part of the autistic spectrum disorder, whether it's a young person who's having problems with drugs or alcohol, or who's very depressed or anxious, or has OCDs, or has schizophrenia, which is one of the biggest psychological psychosis, the older person who has dementia, people who are having sexual disorders, people who are having eating disorders, people who don't sleep, people who don't eat properly, all of these, if you're looking at them, you're looking at 25% of the population. If you're looking at 25% of the population in India, just like abroad, having psychological illnesses, that's a huge population. Considering that you're the educated class coming up and that you're going to change the world and you're going to make India a superpower, I think it is absolutely essential for all of you to be aware of the fact that just like physical health is important, it is absolutely imperative on all of us to pay an equal amount, if not more attention to the aspects related to mental health. Hence, there should come a time when, just like you say, oh my God, you got a stomachache, let's go to the doctor. You should actually tell your friends and you should tell your family, oh my God, you're looking very down. Let's seek the help of a psychiatrist. Only then will India be a superpower that it so aspires to be. Thank you.